Guten Tag und herzlichen willkommen to another German grammar video. Today we're going to be talking about some intermediate level German grammar, and more specifically reflexive verbs, or as they're called in German, reflexive Verben. Okay, to start, reflexive verbs can sort of be thought about as something which you do to yourself. So they'll always have to be accompanied with personal pronoun, which will have to be conjugated, but that's a whole other problem. So to start, here are some common reflexive verbs that you'll see used in everyday German, and that will really be useful to you. And remember, these are all things you do to yourself, so that's why they're going to be reflexive. So the first is sich waschen, which means to wash oneself. And then we have sich duschen, which means to shower. Next we have sich amüsieren, which means to amuse yourself. Sich langweilen, which means to get bored. Sich entspannen, which means to relax oneself. Sich informieren, which means to be informed. Sich schminken, which means to make yourself up or do your makeup. Sich interessieren, which means to be interested in. And a tricky bit for this one is that it has to be accompanied with für. Like in English, we'd say, I'm interested in blah, blah, blah. So in German, für is sort of that adaptation of that. So ich interessiere mich für, and then the rest of the sentence. So you always, that one, you might forget to accompany that with für. That could be a common mistake. But once you sort of get the hang of it, it should sort of make sense that it has to be accompanied with that. And then lastly, we have sich entscheiden, which means to decide. And some of these, I know I said that they are things that you do to yourself. That's why they're reflexive. But some of them don't make sense, like sich entscheiden, you decide. It doesn't really, you don't really do that to yourself. But nonetheless, das ist Deutsch, and I'm not going to question the rules. So next we're going to talk about a little bit about what we can do to craft a sentence with reflexive verbs. And the most important bit that's really different from the rest of German grammar as a whole is found over here in the personal pronouns chart. So as you can see on the chart, I have the nominative version that we all know and love so well of personal pronouns, which is ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie, and sie. And in accusative, as you might have heard earlier in some basic sentences, you see mich, dich, sich, uns, euch, and sich, and that's respective for the different personal pronouns. And lastly, in dative, we have mir, dir, sich, uns, euch, und sich. And you really won't see dative used too often with reflexive verbs, but there is a few instances which require it, and there are really few and far between enough that you can just remember and memorize the specific instances in which you have to use dative, so you don't really need to do anything special for that. Really, the only tricky bit for dative is that you have to remember that ich and du change, instead of mich and dich, they change to mir and dir, and then literally the rest of the pronouns remain the same. All right, so let's conjugate, or let's make a few sentences. So let's use duschen. So it's going to start out just like any other German sentence. First we do our subject. Let's use ich. And then we just take the stem part of the verb. We don't add our ending yet. Ich dusche. Or excuse me, ich dusch. And then we look back and see that our subject is ish. So we might remember from a while ago our conjugation skills, and that would tell us that we need to add an e to the end, ich dusche. All right, so normal sentence so far. And then the thing that's really different about reflexive verbs, like we've talked about, is that we need to add our pronoun to refer back to. That's why there's sich in front of those verbs. So we can go over to a chart and follow ish over to mich. So all we need to do is tack that on there. So ich dusche mich. And then after that, the sentence is the same. So just the additional stuff that you might include in the sentence normally in German. Let's try another one. So let's do RCS. Langweilt sich. And then dot, dot, dot. Really not too complicated. You just need to remember to choose the right extension of your nominative pronoun. That's really the only place where you can be tripped up. And then next, let's practice one of the tougher ones, which is intuition. Really isn't hard, but you can just get tricked up in forgetting to add the für. So it would just start out like any other reflexive sentence. Ich interessiere mich. So normally with a reflexive sentence, we just stop here. That would be our structure, and then we'd add the rest of the stuff for the sentence, the filler, the contents really. But for ich interessiere mich, you need to add the für afterwards, which is really, again, not too complicated. That is really the only extra step. So now let's get on to a few of the dative cases, which will come up. And in my experience, you're really only going to see two main ones, which you'll use in everyday German, and that will come up in everyday life. And they are sich die Haare waschen und sich die Zähne putzen. So, sich die Haare waschen und sich die Zähne putzen. So those mean sich die Haare waschen, that means to wash your hair, or to wash one's hair, and sich die Zähne putzen is to clean your teeth. So let's say you're crafting a sentence and you're using wir. It would just be wir waschen uns die Haare. It doesn't really change, because if you follow the chart over here, it goes from wir, accusative is uns, and then dative is uns as well. The only instance which you might have trouble is if you're doing ich or du. So ich wasche mir die Haare. Or another instance would be like in the sich die Zähne putzen, it would be ich putze mir die Zähne. So that's about as complicated as it gets, and I think that just about concludes today's episode. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you enjoyed. See you next time.